Okay, we have a DVD recorder here. This is a DVD player that can also record onto DVDs. It doesn't have a hard drive built into it, so it has to record live. Got this from a friend, is faulty, so thought I'd have a little look at it. I mean, these are pretty cheap nowadays, but it's an interesting project nonetheless. So basically, first job of any repair, plug it in, see what the problems are. In this case, I plugged it in correctly, yeah. Yep, we get a blue standby light. Sometimes the drive juzzes a little, but nothing further. First rule of any repair is thou shalt check voltages. So I'll set my multimeter up and put the common down there. So that's just resting there, I think. Yeah, that's pretty good. So I'll just test that. So we've got a good ground. And the pins on this main board here are labelled. So what we have first is ground. Yeah, it's red, don't ask me. 5 volts is 7.5 volts. Well, that's a good start. The 3.3 volts is 1 volt. 1.1 volt or so. I'm trying to see the connector here. Without getting electrocuted. We've got ground pin and then two 2.5 volt pins, so this should be 0, yeah, and this should be 2.5 volts, 0.7, 0.7 as well, and then we've got probably another ground. Then we've got a negative 5 volt rail. Let's see, this negative 5 volt is negative 5.1, it's a bit unstable there. Negative 5.2, which is fine. Then we've got 12 volt rail. 12 volts, 11.5, which is a little low, but it should be alright. And we've got a 32 volt line, which is almost certainly for the tuner in this, which is 32.2. And then the rest, we've got key 0.2 and a ground, a control line, and a ground. Now almost certainly the problem is on the 3.3 or 2.5 volt line, and the reason I know this is because what we're measuring here is we're measuring a low 3.3 and a low 2.5 volt. I'll just unplug this right now. Now this power supply is single feedback. It's got a single octocoupler there. It's got a single feedback network, which means it regulates off one of the rails. Most likely it regulates off the most important rails. That is the rails most important for stability, which is going to be the 3.3 or the 2.5 volt. And 2.5 volt will feed the processor. So, if there's a bad capacitor on one of those rails, that rail will read low, and it won't be able to get that rail high enough due to the bad capacitor. In turn, this will cause the other rails to read high, and if they've got bad capacitors, it could also cause them to read high. There are other possible issues. Along here we have some ICs. Now these could be voltage regulators or they could be diodes. I'll have to check them later. But basically I'm going to pull this power supply out and I'm going to do a little quick check of the capacitors on it using an ESR meter. Highly recommend purchasing the ESR meter because none of these capacitors here are bulging. Let's see, date codes. How old is this unit? See if I can get a date code. DVD drive September 2006. It's probably about 6 years old. And you can start getting capacity issues after just a couple of years. Generally you won't see them after a year, although some Samsung TVs had problems after about a year. And it's unplugged now, but always treat a board as if it is dangerous at all times. So that capacitor there can be dangerous. Okay. I'll just remove this now. Okay, I think I've tested every capacitor on the secondary here, and I know the primary is working. Well, at least somewhat. So the only suspect capacitor found is a single failed capacitor, which is that one there. Which has got an 8 ohm ESR. Now, if we have a look at how it's wired, it's going straight around. Where am I following that? That lead there. all the way straight to a diode, so it is under the most stress. It's not after an inductor. If it failed after an inductor, I would be suspicious, whereas that's straight off a rail. So let's have a look here. What voltage is it on? It is measuring. Let's go to an inductor to that pin there, which is, I think that might be the 3.3 volt rail. Have a look at the pin out here. Yep, it's on the 3.3 volt rail there. So that explains the problem, because the 3.3 volt measures low, and obviously it's trying to get the 3.3 volt up, but it can't because of the bad capacitor. And because of that, it's obviously dominantly feedback. The feedback is dominant on the 3.3 volt, and if there is a 2.5 volt, it may be that regulator IC there. If that is a regulator, I'm not sure, but it's quite possibly that's a 2.5 volt regulator. It wouldn't, you know, if the processor doesn't use that much power, it wouldn't make much sense to have an entirely separate 2.5 volt output when you can just regulate it down. Of course, cost always comes into design decisions. So what I'll do, what is it? It's a 2216. Get Panasonic replacement for that, and there's another similar brand, similar markings on there. Since one of them failed, replace the other one as well, and I'll keep note of the brand to be sure. So like I said, by the way, it's a Vestel 12PW3050-1, made in Turkey, I think. Yes. Well, I had to prove to myself that the capacitor was actually failed, so I pulled it out, tested it. Open circuit, completely open. It's a TL capacitor, by the way. Interesting. I guess it was measuring 8 ohm ESR because the other parts of the circuit, I don't always, well, obviously was failed, but I didn't think it was that failed. So replace that capacitor, and that should sort it.